is stress? Defined in a medical context, stress can be a mental, physical, or emotional factor that causes tension in both the body and the mind. Stressors, things that cause stress, can be external, like the environment and social situations, or internal, like illness or from a medical procedure. Stress is caused by an agent called a stressor. Stressors, though commonly thought of as negative, like an excessively busy schedule, can also include the positive, like getting married. On the other hand, stressors are not limited to external factors. Stressors can be created through internal means. There are 3 different types of stress: acute stress, episodic acute stress, and chronic stress. The most common form of stress is acute stress. It comes from pressures of past, present, and potential future demands. It's relatively short and is recognized by most people. It is highly treatable. Suffering acute stress frequently manifests into episodic acute stress. This stress is caused from extensive chaos and crisis. People who are classified as type A are more prone to extreme cases of episodic acute stress. The last form of stress is the most exhausting and draining. This is chronic stress. It is long-lasting, persisting over years, and wrecks our bodies, minds, and essentially our lives. This can be caused through the stresses of being in a dysfunctional household, unhappy marriage, or poverty. Stress presents itself in various ways. Some are through emotional symptoms, and some are in behavioral changes, and some are physical symptoms. Common physical symptoms include muscle tension, muscle aches, headache, fatigue, and changes in sleep patterns, like insomnia. Emotional conditions most commonly consist of short tempers, nervousness, anxiety, drastic mood changes, and irritability. Depression and general unhappiness is also a common occurrence. The individual would often feel overwhelmed and isolated. Lastly, behavioral symptoms arise with elevated stress levels. These symptoms include binge eating or starving oneself, sleeping too much or too little, and withdrawing from personal relationships with others. Procrastinating or neglecting responsibilities are also common symptoms, along with using alcohol and drugs. The areas of the body that you affect through experiencing stress include the brain and nerves, muscles and joints, heart, stomach, pancreas, intestines, and reproductive system. Some of these are because of an individual's engagement of unhealthy behaviors, like extensive substance use and abuse. To cope with stress, it is necessary to recognize your stressors. One may ask themselves, what makes me irritable or overwhelmed? After establishing stressors, which can be major life changers, or a new environment, or even the feeling of large amounts of uncertainty, an individual is now able to identify and understand where the stress is coming from. Merriam-Webster defines eustress as a positive form of stress having a beneficial effect on health, motivation, performance, and emotional well-being. Its characteristics consist of motivating positive energy, improvement in performance, and a feeling of excitement. It is usually short-term and perceived with our coping abilities. De-stress is defined as unhappiness and pain, or suffering that affects the mind and body. It is known to have the characteristics of causing anxiety and concern. Feeling unpleasant decreases performance and can lead to mental and physical problems. It can be both long-term or short-term and is perceived outside our coping abilities. Stress, by definition, is a response to a situation, whereas anxiety is a reaction to the stress. Stress and anxiety are known to share multiple physical symptoms. Acute stress and anxiety, though they overlap significantly, stem from 2 different places in our mind. During stress, hormones adrenaline and cortisol are released through the biological events of the stress response system. After a stressor is identified, a gland receives a chemical message from an area in our brain called the hypothalamus. From there, another chemical message is sent out of the brain to our blood. The stress hormones bind to receptors. The receptors attach to the cortisol, which then delivers the chemical message that sends the body into fury. Cortisol goes everywhere in the body, brain included. To stop the stress system, the receptors decided when enough is enough, and the cortisol travels backward. which shuts down the system. There are multiple ways to reduce stress in one's life, but one of the most effective is adopting a healthy lifestyle. To do this, you have to eat a healthy, well-nourished diet. This keeps you better prepared to deal with stress. Next is to reduce your amount of caffeine and sugar intake. The temporary energy coming from these things usually end with a crash. When it comes to decision making, men and women tend to differ. Men usually take more risks when they are stressed, while women stay reserved. Both sexes understand that making choices when stressed can help them focus on what can go well rather than what can go wrong. Unfortunately, there are some people who freeze when put under a lot of stress. There are many ways to help make sure you make the best decisions when under stress. It is key to avoid letting stress motivate your decisions. You could make a poor choice. Also, you should spend a little time to de-stress every day. And lastly, whenever in doubt, talk to someone who is calm about a decision you want to make while stressed. As a student, you experience stress almost daily. There is the pressure to perform well academically, you have your teachers assigning way too much homework, your parents constantly telling you that you need to work harder, and your incredibly smart friends who make it all look easy. On top of that, we have sports, clubs, and other activities to deal with. In the workplace, stress is easy to come by. Physical stress can be created from noise, lack of privacy, poor lighting, poor ventilation, uncomfortable temperature control, and less than par sanitary facilities. In a study in 2005, 46% of adult stress was from their giant workload.